Welcome to the first video of this new series. So I've decided to kind of take a step back and talk about things a little bit more in detail when it comes to Nimby Rails. So this first episode is all about getting to know the UI, all of the different tabs we have up here, and obviously what they do. And then the next part are going to focus on how you actually create lines, how to do a good network separation of different service types, and all of the more nitty-gritty things of Nimby Rails. But first of all, the first tab you have, besides the info tab, is tracks. And we're going to start in the tracks tab. This one is very large. There are a lot of things. You might get confused at the start. So the first thing we have is move, delete, and edit tracks, hotkey M. Hotkeys you can find here when you go to options, keybinds. So these might be different for you and you can also set them here. I think I've also changed a few of them already. So they might not be exactly the same. Now, move, delete, and edit tracks. You're going to spend a lot of time in this tab because obviously you need to select things. Now, if we were to build a rail, don't worry, we will get to this tab later on, or pretty shortly. If you do this, you can just simply select your tracks, you can select segments, you can select other nodes. If you press shift, you can select multiple segments after each other. And yeah, there isn't that much to this tab, but you will have to do a lot of selections and stuff, so you are going to be a lot of times pressing M and then switching between these two tabs. Now, here you have collections. These are essentially types of tracks or buildings that have already been built by you or other players, which you can use. For example, you can use this station, you can copy and paste it, like so. If you don't want to build a station yourself or something like that. And yes, then you have global. So this is everything you've built currently on the map. You can build all blueprints. I'd strongly advise against that. Instead, you should almost always use build selection. So if we now press the build button, this builds the track we've just built. Now we can undo this. This keybind is not occupied by default. I think if we look at this, I put this one on plus, I think. Tracks blueprint should be yes. So I put this on this bracket right here, and that allows you to re-blueprint tracks you've already built when you've selected them. And then build, this is just a summary of all the things you've already built on your map. Now we're going to go to the largest tab, probably in this entire game besides buildings, like on this track section, and that is the tracks tab. We start at the top. These right here are your height regulators. When you use them, you can use different heights. So this is at ground, this is a bridge, this is an even higher bridge, even higher, and even higher. And obviously, same direction, tunnels. So a -1 tunnel will not intersect with a -2 tunnel, for example, but another -1 tunnel will intersect with another -1 tunnel. That's basically how you regulate your heights. Then we get to this tab right here. These are all your tracks you've preset. So for example, I tend to use this one, the EBO track pack, because the tracks look really nice and they have ballast under them already, which is pretty cool. Now, by default you're going to have the standard game tracks. If you want something to be nicely looking, I'd recommend you to install some mods. It's very easy. You just go to the Steam workshop, search up tracks, have a look at it, what mods you want, and what track looks good, and then you can just enable it in here by just clicking it and clicking enable. Now, you can set tracks you want by in your default hotbar, so you can access them more quickly by going into here. This expands to show you all your tracks, and then just choosing whatever track you want. For example, if I wanted 80 km speed, I could set that to 9, and now I would have 80 km speed at key 9 in my hotbar. Again, here with tracks, you also have this one, we already had at M, so this is just a duplication of this. Now it gets more interesting, because there isn't just this sidebar where you can build tracks. obviously, but there is another one. We start J. If you don't have it toggled, you build a single track. If you have it toggled, you build a double track. That's everything there is to J. There isn't much more to talk about at this point. Now we come to the big mode, point mode or tangent mode. This is how you actually build tracks. If we build a track like so and make a curve, then you can see that right here there's this tangent. So basically at this point the tangent is not part of the track, but it's a tangent. So it spans between these two ends of the track. If we now go to point mode, however, we can just convert this track into point mode. Then you can see now actually there is no tangent anymore. The point where you now move the track is actually on the track. Point mode is very good if you want to build curves, because it makes building curves a lot easier. For everything else, it sucks. I would very much recommend you to always stay with tangent mode, since building tracks in tangent mode isn't that much more difficult. This option right down here doesn't really matter. I don't even really know what it does. Just keep the lower one and you'll be fine. Next one. Always display snapping track guides. This really depends on your preference. What this means is if you don't have it turned on, it means that you can... Let's just show you what if it is when you have it turned on, right? So if you have it turned on, you have this line where you can snap to. Makes it a lot easier to build straight lines. This is great if you're doing something like a fictional network where you just want to have straight tracks. However, if you want to follow, IRL tracks, there is a mod that displays them in the workshop. You have to install that. I think it's show existing railways and then enable it. And then you can see all the railways that are built currently in the current version of the game as a reference point. Now, if you turn that off, you don't have it anymore. This obviously means it's harder to build straight, except you can always press Control and then you get it back. Then you release Control and you can once again build freely, which is why I always recommend turning it off. This also works vice versa, however. If you turn it on, it's turned on, but if you press Control now, it's turned off. So really it depends on what you prefer. This setting really doesn't matter all that much in the grand scheme of things. Another one. I'd always recommend to have this turned on. This is continuously append track segments. This means that if I don't have it turned on, if I now press my mouse click again, this means, look at this, it doesn't automatically append the next segment. I have to click this again to build it. Now, I always turn this on. There really is no downside to it, because now I can just build segment after segment without having to click on the plus sign again. Delete. Merge branches. This one is interesting. I don't often actually use this or toggle it, but you can definitely use it, and I think you should actually. Now, if we go something like this, and now we try to build, for example, a cross, like a diamond crossing, right? The problem is, if you get too near to this, it actually snaps. Some situations you don't want that, so you can turn this off, and now it doesn't snap anymore. So you can more easily build something like this. That's basically all that is to it. If you turn it on, it will snap. If you don't, it won't. But you can't build switches while this is turned off. So you always have to be wary about that. If you have an issue where you can't build a switch, it's probably because this one is turned on, which it turned off, which by default shouldn't be. So that was everything right now that is to the tracks tab. Now we would logically move one down. However, this tab, you should ignore it. It is basically, this is create a station tab. Now I don't use this. I don't use it at all. I don't even know how it works, and honestly, you shouldn't either, because these default stations, they don't look good. We are not going to use them, and you are also not going to use them, because it's far easier to build stations yourself and even quicker than using whatever this is. We are going to ignore this one. Next one, track tools. For this we actually need a bit of track. So now we get to split tools. Here once again we can choose if we want to have edit both tracks, so all the parallel tracks, or if we only want to edit a singular track by hovering over it. The first one is split tracks. Pretty simple. It just divides the segments into two. So now I can move this segment and this segment individually, whilst previously these were one segment, right? That's what split does. Track tape. This one works similar to split, however, it is like a measuring tape. So with this, the primary usage of this is to measure things, but if you click, it also works like a split tape. So if you want to, for example, have a platform of your station that is 110 meters long, you measure 110 meters, done, and you can now build your station. Speaking of building stations, when we're now already at the split tool, here's how you actually create a station. You build a track, you use the split tool or whatever, the cutting tool, it really doesn't matter. You do this, you press M, and now if we select it, this brings up a bunch of options. You can translate, this basically just moves the track, as you can see. You can rotate, pretty self-explanatory. You can set a custom speed. If I want this track to only be 40 kilometers an hour instead of 200, I can do that here. This you will lose a lot when building, if you're building properly. 0 resets this. Parallel offset means obviously these are parallel tracks and they are linked to each other. So if we say 10, you can now see, oh yeah, now the offset between the centers of these two tracks is 10 meters. And now here you can change the mode to tangent mode. I would always say tangent mode full should be your default. And pretty important for some cases, you can remove parallel track constraint here. So now I can move each of these tracks individually and they are no longer linked to each other. That takes care of that. So, but what we want to look at is this one, promote into new station. As I said, we don't use this one. Literally, these things don't look good. Having a station with no platforms looks better than these default stations. So what we just do is we do this and we press promote new station, and this brings up this tab right here. If we now click it, you get this one, this station properties. Name Penzance Park and Ride. So if we automatic name, you can also randomize it here. There are a few mostly, but you could also say, for example, Penzance. Now there is another name. We will talk about station editors later. So the station tab. But this is how you generally create a station. You shouldn't use this. It doesn't look good and it's far faster and more efficient to use the track tools. Building tape works pretty similar. It snaps to tracks and you can basically use buildings, but we will get to that in the next tab. You can choose if it's under track, over track, or roof. This is also going to be explained when we get to the building tab. And obviously for some things you can choose a color. And then there is parallel track tape. This one is very important for yards and also for building stations. Essentially, it allows you to make more parallel tracks next to a track. So here we've added 3 more parallel tracks. Yeah, and that's it. That's what V does. The shortcut for this is V, by the way. For this is I, and this is O, and this is P. You're going to use all 4 of these pretty extensively throughout all your builds. Shortcut for this for me is L for to create signals, and move and delete signals is K. But we're going to get to signals later. Here, concrete, you have the same thing. Here are all your building materials. You can already see here a bunch of platforms installed. And actually, we are going to use platforms to show you how easy it actually is to build a custom station without having to use the game station. And this station looks far better, even on base, than if you were to build it with this tool right here. So, if we now do this, we can, if we press this and we just click and drag, we can build a platform. Now, with buildings, here it comes. Here you have building properties. Draw depth, over tracks. Over tracks you kind of always use for platforms. Under tracks you would use for something that is actually under the tracks, so ballast or something, and roof is just over tracks but higher again. So, now you can press, here you can adjust width and height, but you can also pick track. And this basically locks your building to a track. If you do this, it now logs to this. And now you can see, oh, we've actually added a platform. Obviously, if you can press Ctrl C, you can copy pretty much anything in the game. Then you paste it again and do this. Neat little trick. If the platform happens to be on the wrong side when locking on, you can just press F. F is for flipping, and this flips the platform, or in that fact, any building. Basically what F does, you can see here, start to end, so this is basically the entire width of the segment. If I were to put this at 50, this would be 0.5, this would be at the middle of this, to the end, and vice versa with the other one. And right here, this is essentially where it's located, and if I flip it, it goes from the negative to the positive. So all it does is invert these numbers. And now we've already built a station platform. Very nice. That is pretty much everything that is to building. Obviously, you can build very pretty looking stations with the building materials. But yeah, there isn't that much to talk about really. You will see it in the series more and more once we start building. How we're actually going to use all of these tools I've just presented to you. I've not yet told you many use cases because it's far better to tell them to you when we actually need them. A big part, not really. These are POIs. We're going to ignore POIs for now because this is very much more advanced stuff. We're going to skip this step because this step really doesn't make any much sense if we don't do this step before. Signals. Now, with the new update, you have scripting. There are many more signals right now, but realistically, to get a good network, you only need 1, 2, 3, 4. We skip markers, these are for mods, and platform train stop points we need. So 5 signals. There are path signals. So basically, if you think of a railway signal, this would be your classical railway signal. And there is a new highlight here, which it shows in which direction trains would be coming to be used by this signal. We will talk about signaling more in detail, but this is basically, if you know what standard block signaling is, this would be a block. So the space between these two signals could be occupied by one train, same in this direction. We're going to stick ballasts for now. You just need to know that they're there. We're going to talk about one way. Essentially, when you have like a 2-track main line, you obviously want your trains to be running in one direction only on each track. So this one essentially tells the train, and this is important, between a section where there are no switches. So a free section without a switch. So if I put a switch here, the one-way signal would only work until here. After this, it's void. You can also see this if we select it. Oh, well, that's actually... Did they remove the highlighting from one-way signals? That's actually dumb. Yeah, you would be able to see it, but you can't right now. But it only goes to until the next switch, basically. And it tells the trains, hey, right here, you can only drive in this direction. This is what one-way signals do. No way it tells the train, hey, you can't actually go here. But this is very important. You can set exceptions here. Default, ignore power trains, for example. And then you could use tags, we're going to go to tags later, to tell it which lines or which trains actually are not allowed to go through here. Pretty handy in certain situations. And another one, platform marker stop point. This essentially allows you to customize platform lengths. However, this one actually doesn't work really. The problem with it is that even if you use this marker point, for example, right here, and it tells you, yeah, the platform ends at this, we're going to get to lines later, you can still use this part of the platform for trains. So it's more of a visual help than actually having any function in the game at all, which is why I don't use it. Delete this quickly. Okay, so now we've gone through all of these. These were all the basic tabs. We're going to ignore controls. These are scripts. Scripts got introduced in this version. I don't even know how to create scripts. We will ignore scripts for now. Stations. Station tab is pretty interesting. Here you have a drop-down menu of all your stations. So for example, this is the only station in the map right now. It's called Penzance. And here you have a few options. Obviously, you can use automatic name or not, label full, this is how name and packs looks as in terms of label. Name only, icon only, dot only. Just use what you like. Here you can adjust the station radius. For this I scroll out and you can see if I drag it down, the amount of packs that are actually covered by this area gets smaller and smaller. You can set it to 0. So if we scroll in, we can see, yeah, it gets smaller. You know, the amount of people covered gets smaller the further you go away. Here you can say how many packs are allowed in a station hall. I really don't touch this setting at all. This one also, I've never unchecked it. You can tag stations. You can, there are walk links between stations. You can manually remove them here. So basically packs can walk between stations, but you can remove certain stations from this to tell the game, hey, I don't want packs walking from this station to this station. So they would have to use other transit options. Stop selection signals. This is something more advanced. We're going to talk about that once we get to it. Extensions. This is basically for scripts. We're not going to talk about that at all, probably. Lines. Lines we are going to talk about when we actually have built a few tracks. All you need to know for now, this one button creates a new line, this one creates a depot line, and these ones are for cloning lines, for issuing interventions on lines for trains, and for deleting a selected line. All you need to know for now. Trains. This is the train browser. I have quite a lot of trains installed. We will probably disable a lot of these trains later on. Here you can download mods for trains. There are a lot of them, and then you can use them. Let's, for example, buy a railjet. I know this is very stupid, but let's do it anyway. So, one railjet. One railjet is comprised of all of this. If you go here, if you want to purchase a train, here you can name it, give it a name, a serial ID, so this will be unique to every single train you buy. Here you can choose between different versions of the train. For some versions, there's even a drop-down menu here where you can choose different styles for the train. Also very nice to bring a lot more diversity into your network. Then here, down here, you can give it orders. We're going to talk about it when we've talked about lines. Same thing with auto run line. Here you can choose the amount of trains you actually want to purchase. And then you can purchase trains. We're not going to purchase trains because that would be a waste of money right now. A list of trains. Here you can see all the trains you've purchased. If we were to purchase, this is cheap train. I don't know. Yeah, this one isn't that. Actually, here you can see it's assigned to no line. And this is the train we've purchased. Yeah, let's sell it again. You can also do, you could copy it for a custom train or add it as a custom train. This simply copies it and you can paste it into this menu. And the other one simply just straight up edits it as a custom train. Speaking of it, custom train editor. Name, serial, base color, default color. Here you can set a base color. Some trains you can recolor. And then you can use a decal line color or custom color if you want to choose. Here are all the stats, so how fast it is, how many people it can carry, mass, acceleration, maintenance costs, running costs per day, and the dimensions, so the length and the width of the train. And right here is the meat and bones of making custom trains yourself. Rolling stock. So if I were to go into here and I go to, I don't know, DB, electric locomotives or diesel, let's do diesel locomotives. I can choose, for example, the class 2, I don't know, a class 245. Here you can choose how many you want. Then you press append and then you can put it into here. I could also change this type and the coloring of it. Then you can go ahead and choose some of your wagons you actually want, like so, for example. Let's say we append 5 of these, then we take one of the control cars. We obviously change it DB Regio colors. And then right here you can obviously name it and purchase it again. And that's how you actually build custom trains. You can obviously scroll through these menus and you can build some funny trains with it if you're up for it. This one would have capacity of 530. That's a very nice train for a realistic game of Nimby Rails. out. It only is also 177 meters long. This would be a good train. So I believe with that we've now covered almost everything you know. Schedules, there's no point talking about this before we've talked about lines. We will ignore this tab for now. All you need to know is this is where you will implement your timetables for your railway lines. This is where all the magic is going to happen if you want to go in depth and actually timetable your lines with depots and tags and everything. You could also just use auto run, which we're going to see later. But if you want to go in depth schedules, you will spend a lot of time in here. We go to map here. That's your current bank balance. If you click it, you can actually see how many ridership and how much waiting at stations are there currently. Obviously 0. Date, time, speeding the game up and speeding the game down. Map options. These disable map labels, this disables user labels, POI points, disables signals, disables station icons, disables station names. Obviously these are pretty self-explanatory. These ones right here are a little bit more difficult. If we look at this now, this means that the track editor is always on top. So if you're building tracks, these lines will actually stay under the tracks, which is pretty important if you want to trace lines. Map over track layers, this simply means that bridges are over the track layer. If you disable this and disable this, you would tracks will be visible over bridges. Can also be useful for debugging. And I don't know what this does. This is disabled always by default, so I have no idea what it does. I've never touched it, and I can do literally anything in the game, so it's probably wisest not to touch this setting. Here you can disable certain layers, so for example I can disable the ground layer, and now visually everything's gone. But if I turn it back on, obviously it's back. It doesn't disappear, it just turns the visual off for it. Here you can enable style mods for your that you've installed. So for example, where is it? Show existing railways. If I turn this off, existing railways are no longer shown. That is the mod I talked about, and the mod you should at least download when playing the game. Playing this game unmodded literally makes 0 sense. You have to use mods. At least a few like show existing railways to actually see where railways are. Here you can turn on and off population to, spot where it would be, economical to go and build lines to. This one shows you regions. Yeah, I mean, you can do it. You can use it, definitely. It's another view. You can obviously also have these turned on together. Here we have plain tracks. This is the default one. Then we have lines overlay. We don't have a line right now, but this would show all lines that are currently on the map with colors. Speed overlay shows you the current speed of tracks. These are 200 kilometers fast. And track reservations show you if tracks are reserved. We don't have trains running right now, so this literally doesn't do anything if we click. Yeah, that is basically everything in map options. Assets, you have a bunch of stats about everything here, from running costs to late arrivals and everything. You just have to click through this and explore it yourself. Here you have charts for certain things, for example for penzance, for stations, for dollars total. You can create charts as well if you want to. This one limits all the data to the things that are visible. So if I go away, penzance is no longer shown. If I'm back here, penzance is shown. This one means that only certain tags are shown. And this one is just simply sorting. Next one, tags. Pretty self-explanatory. You can create tags, for example, project. And then we're going to start in Great Britain. Great Britain. And under here, for example, you could put all your lines. Let's say, for example, Southern. Since we're going to start in the south, we're going to start Southern. And here, under this tag, for example, we could put all the lines we create. Company and accounting settings, another big tab. We go to info first. The name, the amount of track segments we have, building stations, how many packs we actually, how many packs tiles are active. So basically packs are grouped into small tiles. How many lines we have, how much train we have. Here you can switch to unlimited money, and this cannot be undone. So if you switch once, you are on unlimited money all the time. You can export accounting data. you can export timetable data. So when you have timetables, you can export those, and you can export GeoJSON. So basically you can export the track layouts and stuff like that, and actually look at them in, I think, for example, QGIS, and I think also Google Earth. I think you can refresh all line timings. This is pretty handy to debug some lines. This, if you have a crash, for example, if two trains are blocking each other, this basically resets both of them. This resets all trains currently on the network. This resets the entire simulation, so also all the timetables. This sells all trains, deletes all lines, deletes all schedules, and obviously you can bulk edit stations. These three. Be very careful about this. I would recommend you to never ever use them, because yeah, you can't undo these. If you haven't saved your game in a while, you're going to lose a lot of progress if you use any of these. So be very careful. Loans, basically you have a starting loan always of 1 billion. It costs you 18 million a month, so that kind of gives you an idea how much money you have to earn per month. Then you can take out more loans, how many years you want, and that obviously then changes how much you have to pay each month. And then you can obviously also pay back loans if you have enough money. Options. Map time zones, I always keep on approximate. If you're going to build trans-European networks, if you build real timetables, you keep approximate. If you build fictional, I'd recommend always 0, so that you don't have to deal with different time zones. Accounting time shift is basically, I don't even know what it does. Yeah, it says here. Yeah, so basically this shifts the time. This breakdown right here, this daily breakdown, starts for each day. This is the parallel track offset, so how far parallel tracks are away when I create them. You should always set this to 4. This looks more realistic. The default is 5, so I would always change that if you have a new map. You can even, for example, for Great Britain, here tracks are pretty narrow. You could also, for Great Britain, change this to 3.5, and this would be totally fine. But in general, 4 should be the norm. Overlap distance, I think there's also an explanation for it. No, actually not. But this is, if you, for example, if we now do, let's say we have 1.5 as our default, then you see here, this white highlight means that it's overlapping. So everything about below 2 meters gets highlighted as an overlap. Box spawn station. If you want a realistic network, go for this, but this slows down performance a lot. I would recommend keeping this on random, because this means you have the best performance. Global demand factor. This basically means how many packs actually spawn in a station. So this one has a base of 14,000 people. Now, this is 100% demand. This number never changes. But if I go to 50% demand now, this would effectively be a station that covers 7,000 people. Whereas I'll go to 100, this carries to all of them. Obviously, this works in the other direction. 900, this will be over 100,000. Realistically, even with 100%, you're going to have a lot of trains running. Like, if you want to be realistic and say, okay, I want realistic timetables, I kind of want, realistic amount of packs, you don't go to 100, you go to 30. 30% is roughly where also real life timetables work. So this is where you would be if you wanted to build a network where you just replicate what is there already 1-to-1 or something like that, and then add your own timetables. That's when you would choose 30. 100% is kind of, YOLO. You're going to have to upgrade basically all the infrastructure that has ever been built. You're going to have to upgrade that. And we're not going to talk about demand curve editor or mod POI layer options right now. Here you can also edit your new station defaults, so basically how your new stations are going to be created. And then we have accounting. It basically gives you an overview of your profits and all of your expenses. You can also create line graphs off of that. So for example, the credit or the amount of tracks we've built and everything like that. Here obviously you can enable mods. This is pretty self-explanatory. And here you can search for things. For example, if I now wanted to go to London, 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 city of London, I can just search for London, press here, and I will be teleported to the city of London. Very nifty also. If you want to, for example, search for, let's say I want to class, let's say what class is there? Class 420. So if I want to purchase a class 420 BR, I can do that by just searching for it here. This is essentially a search function. I would like it more if it was actually integrated into here instead of being here. But you can search for trains, which is good. Because if you have 1,000 trains, you might not actually be able to find them otherwise. If I now, for example, search for P87 Docklands, so for example, Stadtbahnwagen B, yeah, I could just get a Stadtbahnwagen B. Or something like this, or M8C, or B-Wagons. Yeah, pretty nifty. And here, obviously, main menu. Here you could create a new game, you can save games, you can even share your games. So if you press here and then press upload current game, this would share it. Options, obviously a lot of things. Here you can change graphics, interface, performance. I would crank this up to the maximum amount your PC allows. Obviously that. Here you can change how your map is displayed, your autosave settings, so how many autosaves, your actual slots you want, how often you want to autosave. Here you can have alerts for different types, for example for collisions, for line is closed, you don't actually want an alert for that. I also want this, you want to that, these alerts you want. Schedule is closed, we don't want an alert for that. Cannot dispatch, tracks are busy, not enabled in active schedules, if we don't want that alert. Cannot dispatch, enabled shifts are already assigned. We probably want to keep that. And uploader allows you to upload mods. That's basically it. And these are just the credits for Nimby games. Yeah, and that's basically an overview of most of the UI parts. And in the next episode, we are actually going to start building something. So, I hope to see you again soon.